Hello, welcome back. In this today's video, I want to talk about how to play against the move 1 to b3. That was a move that was played in this game. So this was played in round 4 of the whole Congress, whole 4NCL Congress. So what is the whole 4NCL Congress, you might ask me? Well, the 4NCL was set up by Mike Duran and Chris Dunworth, and this is back in the 1990s, and continues to this day. Now, the 4NCL originally was intended as a team competition, which it continues, but they also organise, the company organises tournaments. Now, the 4NCL itself is struggling a bit, in terms of there's not much investment, sponsorship, the hotels have become more expensive. So very difficult for the 4NCL Mike Duran to turn a profit. They don't make a profit from the event. So if you can support the 4NCL in some way, that would be very beneficial to English chess. Probably more money should go into the 4NCL from outside sources, because it's one of the few success stories in English chess, I would say. Anyway, the main focus of this topic is to talk about this game. Now, I was playing against Anusha not sure about the pronunciation, Subramanian. Very promising young player, I believe. Same kind of age group as people like Nina Pert, as daughter of Richard Pert. So very kind of familiar in English chess circuits. These kind of junior players already. I do believe that the whole junior scene now is just stronger than it ever was. If you're looking around the world, we saw yesterday Hans Niemann lost to a 12-year-old, maybe 12 or 13-year-old player, somebody born 2010. And so you're looking at the promising young players. You're looking at people like Hans Niemann, Gukesh, Firouzja, Prag, Abdu Sattarov, and you think Vincent Keimer, thinking, well, aren't they going to do well over the next few years? I'm sure they will. But they also have to deal with players who are even younger than they are. I mean, this is a typical pairing you're getting now. You're playing people born in 2009, 2010, because they're starting to come into chess, and starting to play a lot on the circuit. So it's to me, the whole junior scene is very fluid, and it's very unclear who are going to be the top players in several years' time. The one thing I would say is, although I'm getting older and I'm, struggling because I'm getting a lot of these pairings a lot of the time, there's also the case that a lot of players who are younger, who are good and who are improving, will probably quit chess, in a few years, or else they won't play as much. They won't continue. So you do look at it and you think, God, I'm struggling against this player born 2009, 2010. What chance have I got, in 5 years' time when they're going to hit their peak or be much stronger than they are? I'm not going to have much chance. But you also have to take into account the fact that they'll probably drift out of chess. They'll probably get a career. I'll still be bumming around, being a full-time professional. So, 15 years ago, we had the same problem, right? There were all these promising kids. Anyway, I've waffled on enough. Let's get on with the chess. So should we look at the opening phase? So how do we look at the... let's look at the whole opening here, this whole setup. So black has a choice here after the move b3. In my opinion, the move d5 is equally good. Now, after bishop b2, I would recommend playing the move bishop g4. This actually has quite a big benefit. If you ever play like bullet chess online, I'm sure a lot of you do. This has quite a big benefit that a lot of people will pre-move the move e3. I've had this many times where they pre-move the move e3. You take on d1, and you generally end up winning the game. Although there probably have been examples where I've failed to win, even winning the queen that early on, through pure stupidity. But in general, that's game over, right? Some people will just resign at that point. There is a trap here as well that you have to watch out for. There's move f3 here, e4 takes, queen e2. Now, if you're careless here and play a move like e6, you suddenly realise the point of this move, which was queen e2, which is to come out here and then double attack on the king and the bishop. So after the move queen e2, I would recommend playing a solid move like c6, just to avoid that. And then black should be okay. Generally, what happens is that white will probably play knight f3, and after bishop takes, either take out with a pawn, probably take out with this pawn, and then I play like a solid setup like this, and c6, and black should be okay. You can also play g6. You can even play it like this. I've had games like this actually. And what I do is I go knight h5 here. And the idea is if you take, I take back the knight. And now the knight is heading for f5, where it controls important d4 squares. Sometimes the queen can come out to f6, increasing control over that diagonal. Black should be okay. So d5 is quite a reasonable way to play against 1b3. But e5 is a very reasonable move. Now after e5, bishop b2, knight c6, e3. We now come to a junction. Now, I did see a game the other day, which I thought was a very impressive game by Magnus Carlsen. He was playing against Wesley So in the Speed Chess Championships. He beat him, I think, something like 21-7. It was an incredible score to beat somebody of that level by that margin. Just shows how good Magnus is. And of course, he went on to beat Nakamura in the final in a much closer match. I believe that was 13.5, 12.5. I watched that last night. But in one of the games, Magnus was black against this b3 system. And Magnus himself has played this b3 system. It has the benefit, actually, of being quite tricky for black to play against. Because you have this slow build-up. It's not clear what black is trying to do. A lot of people don't know how to respond against the move b3 because they're all well prepped up in main lines, so it's got that kind of sting about it. I did lose a horrible game against Tim Wall in a rapid play game. I got a decent position out the opening, but then I blundered at some point, and the game was played in I believe it was in Leeds, somewhere near Leeds. Oh, it was kind of like a village near Leeds, and I kind of stormed out of the. I was in contention to win the tournament. I really should have won that tournament because I was like the top seed and I felt like I was like the best player. But a guy called Zarakuskis won it legitimately. He played really well in that tournament. And he's from Lithuania. And I lost to Tim Wall. It was either the penultimate round or one of the last rounds. And I was kind of really, really annoyed. And I stormed out and then I kicked like a stone wall that was outside the hotel, which was kind of embarrassing, but nobody really saw it. I was just really, really angry. But yeah, I mean, that was against b3. So this b3 system does have quite a lot of bite. But after e3, I believe that Magnus played knight f6, which I checked this on Twitter, and Boris Avruk, who's a keen poster on Twitter, I would recommend following him if you're interested in chess, because he knows a lot about chess. He's a former 2600 player. He might still be 2600. He doesn't really play much anymore, more like a trainer. And he was recommending this system. He said this is his favourite system against b3 system. He played knight f6. The other move that black can play is also d5, which is quite a decent move as well. But then white ends up getting lots of pressure against the centre with bishop b5. I analysed this years ago, and I believe you play bishop d6, and I think they play me like f4. And you go queen h4 check. Yeah, it's got this line, queen e7, knight f3, f6. Now, if white tries to win the pawn here, I believe you can even run into some kind of difficulty because black goes knight f6 and gets loads of long-term play on the light squares. I think I analysed that many years ago. But instead of d5, Magnus played knight f6. Now, after knight f6, bishop b5, you play this weird move, bishop d6. So essentially, you're kind of defending this. Obviously, it was a threat on e5, or taken on e5. You don't really want to go d6, slightly passive, and then white go d4, start attacking. So bishop d6 was played in that game. I believe, yeah, Wesley played something like knight a3, but eventually Magnus played a kind of knight b4. I don't know if anyone knows that game or has got. Maybe you could leave the comments below, but somehow, at some point, Magnus played a knight b4 later on, and it was really good. And so I don't think he went knight a5. He must have played another move. Maybe went a6 actually. No, but the bishop was on b5, I think. So I'm not sure what he played, but he ended up winning the game. It was an impressive game. So that's also another line that is worthy of investigation. But the line I recommend against this whole b3 system is playing this move knight e7. Now the reason I recommend it is I played a training game many moons ago. It was probably after the Tim Waller game actually, and I was like, how do you play against this b3 system? Or maybe I'd already devised this knight e7 system but messed it up against Tim Wall. I can't remember, but I remember the computer playing this knight e7 move, and I was thinking it's actually quite a clever system. So apparently the top move is c4 here for white. Now what happens after c4? Yeah, black plays d5. So the two ideas about this knight e7 move is one is to play knight g6 and defend this pawn on e5. So you're giving extra protection to e5, take the pressure off this knight on c6. And the other is to play this move d5, so that when white takes, you can capture back with the knight. And I think black has quite a decent position here. The knight stands quite well in the centre. It's kind of like, it looks a little bit like a system you could get in English defence, where black goes for an early d5. There's also a little bit of a hole on d3 here. Imagine if the knight jumped into b4, suddenly it might be threatening to go to d3. So understandably, white plays a3. Apparently, black plays bishop d6. And we get something like this. Knight f3. Queen e7. Yeah, I feel like I quite like black's position here. Well, maybe I'm biased because I'm trying to recommend the system in general. d3. So how do we score here from here? We're saying 19% for black, 30% for white, 51% chance for draw. f5 is potentially recommended as a possible move. So very interesting play. So that's one possibility after the move 90. So I would recommend investigating this yourself. So he played probably the most natural move, which is knight f3. But I believe I didn't respond in the right way. So I'd looked up this line before the game. Well, no, I'd looked up this line in general before. I didn't prepare against b3 specifically. I didn't expect her to play b3. And she played the opening very, very well. So if knight f3, I was slightly in a flummox, and I thought if I go knight g6, yeah, I didn't really prepare this before the game, and my memory was kind of failing me at this point, and I couldn't remember after knight f3 what you were supposed to play. So it shows the limit of my preparation. You know, I'm not really known for my theory these days. You know, we were having a funny discussion on Twitter the other day, and somebody said, oh, it was John Bartholomew. He was talking about some line. Funny enough, it was from that Wesley So versus Magnus Carlsen match. He was talking about, it was some game where Wesley followed a line that was known to theory for 18 moves, and he was saying it's kind of a depressing position to play for black because in a Najdorf, because it seems like only white can win from this position, and he was right. But I said, isn't it a bit depressing now that there's like 18 moves of theory and there's been 30 odd games? It just shows how much people can remember theory. And then I said something like this. And then somebody said, Oh yeah, and then I said something about, this isn't great for people like me with memory problems, as is kind of a joke, right? And then someone said, "Oh, isn't it like, yeah, but we're like amateur players." And then somebody else came in and corrected him and said, "No, this guy's a GM who's posting. He might look like an idiot. I'm kind of post with silly names. I keep changing my name on Twitter. My current name is Diego Marley Monster. Follow me on Twitter. I should post links on the YouTube actually. It's a stupid name. It's basically Diego Velasquez is a horse running for Aidan O'Brien, and I kind of regard it as a bit of a potential Marley monster, Marley middle distance monster. We should probably curse that horse forever. It's got no chance of doing anything. Actually, look out for a horse called what's it called again? By if it ran second in the Mayhill for Balding, Andrew Balding. I think it's something like South Seas or something. No. Anyway, yeah, look out for that horse. Quite promising. I think the trainer quite likes it. But yeah, so I post on these stupid names, so people assume I'm not a GM, right? And I put up silly pictures and everything. But this guy corrected him, said, "Yeah, I'm a GM." And then someone else came and said, "Oh, this guy obviously isn't a GM," blah, blah, or something like that. And he was like, "Yeah, but so he's on point because he was replying to this other guy, but you're talking about this guy who is a GM, but this other random person on Twitter." And I found that a bit offensive, so I corrected that guy as well. But anyway, actually, I can't even remember why we got onto that subject. So maybe I should just focus on the chess, right? But yeah, it's basically a sign that your memory is quite poor, right? But it's difficult to know these lines very well because they're kind of obscure. So knight g6, I was thinking at the board, you got to think at the board, right? You can't just assume that you know the theory. Yeah, unless you're absolutely certain, if you might maybe vaguely check this in the past like I have, and then you have to start thinking at the board, unless you're absolutely certain you played it 1,000 times in practice, you know, start thinking at the board, right? Don't assume that you know what you're talking. And here I was very concerned about the move h4. I thought if I go knight g6, c goes h4, that's absolutely correct. If e4 doesn't move like h5, for example, you take on f3, we take there. This is kind of like my nightmare. I don't want to get this position against a 14-year-old dangerous player. Probably just going to lose. So I wanted to avoid that. But the correct move in this position as black is to play the move e4. That's a really good move. Attacking the knight. Where does the knight move? If it moves to d4, you take. And I believe you just play something like this. So in the game I was concerned here this pawn on e4 would become a target. But after a move like d3, undermining that pawn, there are a few issues here for black. For example, you see this bishop here. It's not so easy to develop this bishop because the bishop will take on g7. So it's not straightforward, this position. But I believe you can just do something simple like this. And I think you got quite a decent position. Again, investigate this at home. But I remember analysing it later, and actually black can even go queen d7 and castle queenside. You could get a setup like this. Maybe hackers would go bishop d6 here because they wouldn't be afraid of the capture on g7. It's probably quite right. Rook g8, the bishop drops back. You've got ideas of attacking, clearly ideas of attacking on the king side. For example, something like this. Now if the bishop drops back to here, say, already starting to think about moves like this. Queen h4 is another possibility. But even something like this might be possible, right? Rook g2, is this, maybe this is only a draw though, because I've already given up so much material, but minimum draw here. Looking very dangerous for white. King f3 is queen g4, mate. King h2, you've got bishop g4 and win the queen. Actually, that's good, isn't it? Bishop g4, king g1, take on d1, and if you go rook d1, I've got queen g4 check. So taking on g7 is too much. So black should be okay. You should probably even be able to just castle kingside if you're slightly concerned about this queen d7 castle queenside stuff. But also you could even go here and then castle queenside. So I think e4 was the big miss for me. This is what I should have played. And the engine confirms that black is doing quite well here. But I played a sloppy move. I went d6. He played d4. No, sorry, so he went c4. And he played a very good move here, d4. I went bishop g7. My idea was if he took, I go bishop g4, pin before, because at the moment this pawn is pinned. I don't take back, because if I take back, so he goes queen d8, and then I'm going to have to take back the king, which looks really unpleasant. The king's stuck in the center. So I would have avoided that variation. But I thought he could have definitely taken. He played d5, which was fairly reasonable. And here, yeah, I shouldn't have gone bishop g4. I should have gone knight d7 and just played for a kind of King's Indian type position. You can go a5, knight c5. Potentially you can go f5. I saw this, and I thought, actually the computer says the best move is a5. I saw this, but for some stupid reason I was tempted into bishop g4. I seem to often play bishop g4 in King's Indian type positions. It was a horrible game. I lost to Andy Ledger, which funny enough was also in Hull. And that was a game where if I won, I potentially would have been British champion. And I was black in the penultimate round, and I ended up losing a horrible... I mean, he played really well, but I played quite badly. So that was a bad experience. But that was also in a King's Indian type setup. So he played an excellent move there, knight d2, really good move. And now white is clearly better. Again, another good move, h4. Maybe hide the moves here, but I'll show you what happened in the rest of the game. I think e4 was the best, actually. I thought her best move was maybe g4. I don't have to go g4, of course, but I felt like this. What he wants to do is go h5. Induce the move g5 and then potentially lock it up with e4. This is what I was really afraid of, positionally speaking, because h5 you don't really want to allow the capture and open up the h file. But if you go g5, then e4 and the position's locked up, and then c would probably be better in that case, because I think white has more chances to do something on the queen side than black. Potentially maybe a move like f5 is playable though. But I thought g4, yeah, but then I think you take. And then you force black to capture there and then open up the g file, and then you've got a very comfortable position. So I felt like this part of the game was where she's... Because the pawn on e3 is actually quite well placed. It defends important squares. So I don't think you want to go e4 until you absolutely have to. But she played e4 and I went f5, and this is where she made a mistake. It's quite a big mistake, and I think again, any kind of normal move, even just taking, would have been reasonable. But then I take with a knight, and then this is what she was concerned about probably. So up till this point, she played really well, but g4 was quite a poor move because, as Naroditsky explained on the broadcast, or maybe it was Casacorli the other day, when they were talking about when you push your pawns, there's always a drawback, right? Because you're weakening the square next to that pawn, potentially. Can you imagine going back 2 moves? White had complete control over f4. The pawn could go to g3. The pawn was already on e3, controlling f4. And now she's completely lost control over g4. So positionally bad the way she's played this game. And now I exploited that because I played knight f6. And then the knight's coming to h5. So suddenly the knight's finding an excellent square on f4. I'm controlling f4. And it also makes it very difficult for her to make any meaningful progress on the king's side. Yeah, I mean, these moves were kind of obvious, right? But I missed a big chance. It was a really beautiful move that I missed here. Really, I don't know. You might even want to freeze your... So black to play. There was a beautiful sequence that I missed that the computer pointed out. I mean, you might prefer to, flip the board. Well, you can't flip the board because it's on the video screen, right? I could flip the board, but I can't be asked, I can't be bothered. But you can try and work it out. Imagine if you were white here, what would you be concerned about? Black to play. I didn't find this. I didn't see this tactical idea, but it was a beautiful idea that black has here that effectively would have put her in big trouble. So the move I played in the game was queen c8. That was not terrible, but not a very good move. And what I could have played instead with knight f4. So the main tactical idea is if white takes on f4, you go rook c8 check. Very nice idea. So clearly we've got to move the king. We don't want to move it into the firing line. So the natural move is king b1, knight c3. Black wins the game. In fact, after here, maybe you can even take here and you're really having fun. The king is just wide open now. The queen is stranded. Look at this knight and rook. They're not really in the game. This game will not end well for white. So going back to this position, I should have gone knight f4. Didn't see this tactical idea going rook c8, knight c3. Not easy to spot. Yeah, so I think effectively white would have been in trouble here. Oh, hang on. No, I've gone too far. Let's just go back. Yeah, that was the final position, sadly. Yeah. Well, I'll show you what happened anyway. Yeah, so I went queen c8, queen f5, knight b4, good move. I thought she was going to go a3 here, and then I was possibly going to respond with a5 with the idea if you take, you just take back, and then it's big trouble for the white king. But, you know, the game would have continued. I think knight, she went knight e3. And that was also a mistake. A difficult position to play for white. So I think it really stems back to that g4 move. Made it tough for her. Hard to play after that. Up till then, she played an excellent game. She was outplaying me. But this is kind of like a slight tactical mistake because now I went back. Difficult move, easy move to miss. That suddenly now, you know, you wait, you picked up a pawn, but now you come back and then you attack the knight. And now if the knight moves, knight check will be hanging. Pick up the rook, pick up the exchange. And if you move the knight, say here, I'm still going to do this and win material. So C played bishop c3. I did actually think here, I strongly considered playing this. And I realised that would have won another pawn. And probably that was the way to go. And black surely is winning after something like this. But I just felt like, practically speaking, she gets a rook into d7 maybe later on. Maybe not immediately because of rook e4, but some weird move like knight c1 or knight, you know, like you can just keep the game going. You know you have to keep, you know, you see this line, you know it's good, but you know the game will continue, right? And you lost a little bit of initiative. You know, I knew that I would probably be winning it, technically speaking, but I just felt like it's tough to play, and you know she's going to play a lot of moves like rook e7 eventually and start getting the initiative, and you know it starts to become harder, practically speaking. So I felt like, you know, she was getting short of time. I didn't really want to allow that, so I went a5, which is probably not a very good move compared to just grabbing another pawn. But I felt like, practically speaking, it was put in a difficult spot. But that turned out to be the case because I think taking was wrong. Actually, she should have played something else. Because now this is really dead lost. With it, I've got the dark squares as well. And yeah, now I was having fun because these pawns are like rampant, right? This is so easy to play for black. This is just a very simple win. It's not particularly interesting. Bishop c3 to resign the game because you can't. Yeah, you can't even save the piece here, right? You're going to lose. Is that right? Yeah, I don't think you could even say you're going to lose a piece, and then I've still, you know, if black didn't have a king side, then you know you'd probably hold the rook and bishop. You'd probably hold the ending, the rook against the rook and bishop, but black can just win with the outside pass pawns. So yeah, I won that game. But I think, although I went wrong in the opening, I think this is a good way to play against this b3 system. So if we go right back to the start of the game, the line I'm recommending, we could even flip the board. If you're ever black in this against this b3 line, you play knight e7, and then yeah. So the two moves. So c4, you go d5, and you take the center. And if they go knight f3, remember to go e4. And the other point about this move is that if white now goes bishop b5, which is a typical move in the system, you can simply reply a6, and now you get this knight. This is a fantastic square. And black has won the bishop pair, so this isn't really what white is looking for. So generally, they'll go c4 or knight f3, but I think this is a good system against the b3, 1b3 Nimzovich-Larsen system.